Good morning. I will be with you momentarily. I was hoping to have a counterpart today, but it doesn't seem that Jordan is quite awake yet, which is understandable given it is only 7 a.m. in Taos, New Mexico, where he now lives. And so I will get started in just a moment. I just want to put one thing in the YouTube chat so that everybody knows how to join us if they want to. And so that takes me a couple of seconds to get the information out and to put it on the YouTube chat. And I will have that accomplished within the minute. So wait a minute. Is everybody enjoying the Olympics? Quite incredible in many ways. Certainly. Good morning, Big Cat. Welcome. Nice to see you today. Oh gosh, where is this? Okay. I have more than 1 million files on my computer, as you might guess. And so let me just put this in the chat. Okay, so I'm putting the link for all panels, but we're not going to have much in the way of wisdom path panels in the next few months because I need some recovery time after prostate radiation therapy. I have 3 weeks to go on it, and it's not that this therapy itself is difficult at all. It's become my favorite time of the day because it is 8 minutes of quiet where people leave me alone, and I have taken to falling asleep during that 8 minutes. But the prep for it is rather challenging every day and every weekday. And that takes about 5 hours to have your innards in the proper configuration so that you can be treated. Jordan, you're here. Welcome. Let's see if he gets, he's joined us, so good. Can you unmute, sir?
I set up over on the other side of my table and I come on and there's just this big orange light. It's the ceiling fan light and I couldn't get my head in front of it. So I have to turn the whole table around and move everything on the desk.
Oh boy, man.
So good morning.
I see you have the toothpicks inserted into your eyes, so you're ready to go.
You got it. Yeah, I sat down. Oh, this is fine. I'm on time. And then we can't record like this.
Yeah. Oh goodness. Well, it's good to see you in this conversation. We already have 7 folks watching us on YouTube, and
nice.
So welcome everybody. And there's Kushbu. Hi, Kushbu.
Oh, hey, Kushbu.
Yeah. So I hope to chat with you later, Kushbu, after we finish this session. And so anyway, tell this group, because you've been away for a while, what's been happening in your life so that everybody is up to date.
Well, I think the short version is not this weekend, but last weekend I was in North Texas at my dad's memorial service, which my stepmother and the church put together just quite an amazing service. It was so reverent and so beautiful. And it had been so long since I heard the pipe organ in our church there. And my stepmother, Lynn, chose Toccata, which is almost like the voice of God yelling at Job, and Job's little treble voice of, when he says, I accept my suffering, but why? And God's, where were you when I created the world? Where were you? And this whole song is just, and then you get the stained glass voice of God and light. And I swear the first 10 rows, the whole floor was shaking, because it took the bass of this huge pipe organ way out at its limits. And so I have to say I had tingles, and that was a wonderful, wonderful service. And then I've recently, over the last 3 months, moved to Taos, New Mexico, from the East Coast. And honestly, pace with grace and one step at a time, have been just allowing the move to take the move. It was one of those giant phases in my life that treating it with business as usual to all my commitments, I think would not have allowed me to really dial in, settle in, and then come back here with, a hat from my dad, his favorite hat. And I really feel at home now. And I want to thank everyone out there for their comments and questions, and Kushbu for being concerned when you weren't aware that I was in the process of a big move, as to where I was. So I think the biggest thing that's happened is moving to Taos. And this weekend was quite this last weekend at the service was my summer, I don't think, started until that was complete. I don't think I was truly stepping on the gas. I've been reading Thoreau full time on the John Dunn Plaza here. Met some shop owners who referred me to the owner of the whole property, and we hit it off. And so I'm doing that 5 or so days a week, and I've got a big rig and big green umbrella. And so the biggest thing that's happened, I think, is one of those, life is what passes you by when you're too busy making plans. And I did step by step and got here so that I'd be living more fully. So, thank you for asking.
Well, that's cool. I think a lot of us would like that life of just living out in the sunshine and reading Thoreau for random tourists.
From random people. And it's funny because my client docket is starting to fill up with locals who are like, I want to read it, but I want it at home. So, so and it's interesting because it's what I've done full time forever. But I really am enjoying it even more now. It's I have a hat, and in the sun. I did realize though, when the umbrella, you keep moving it to track the sun, to keep everybody, me and them, in shade. And then it rained, and I realized that only 12 inches of the 4-foot table was actually under the umbrella.
Of course,
because I'm dealing with sun angles instead. And so I think every day there's been some new learning curve, be it just from that or just personally, because you're kind of just out in the park, so to speak. It's very contemplative without having to contemplate.
And if and when it rains, then you're not working. You have a day off.
Well, and it's funny because there's the difference between, quickly like a chef, roll up the knives under the umbrella and wait it out. But then when you wait it out and then you hear the thunder and you look up, and then the next time you see the lightning, it's only 1,001, boom. You're like, lightning can travel a mile in the air. I'm under an umbrella. I don't care if it has a rubber non-conductive top, I'm still asking for it. So yeah, at that point, it becomes a day off. So then I go home and work on the business or drive to the cabin, or which I guess is a really good problem to have, I have to say.
Yeah. So we have a very nice comment here from Kushbu. She says, thanks for the update. Honestly, I am more interested in you both beautiful beings than what you read. Laugh out loud. Reading is cool, but you both are way cooler.
Thank you. I think it's funny when someone actually this week said, well, if you started doing when you were 7 and you didn't read any books on tarot until you were 23, how did you learn it? And I said, they said, what did you read? And I said, cards.
Yeah.
Like, so I appreciate that, Kushbu, because I know I enjoyed this here with Skip and with you out there and the listeners. So thank you. That's a nice honor.
Yeah. And in terms of my updates. By the way, yesterday we had a session with Nozomi Hayase, who is a journalist who fell down the Bitcoin rabbit hole about more than a decade ago, I suppose. And she's been writing about it ever since. And it's quite fascinating what's happened in cryptocurrency since Bitcoin came on the scene. And so anyway, it was an interesting conversation. It's worth taking a listen to.
I'm going to go back and watch the recording. That just the prices, the synopsis you put in about it was really interesting. From I'm into Bitcoin just a little bit, certainly not as far as anywhere near she is, but but it's weirdly perplexing. So I'd love to watch the recording to see what she had to say.
Well, due warning, Nozomi and Bitcoin itself are all logos, 100%, because they're all about math, right?
Right.
And there are now unintended consequences to Bitcoin, because, for example, people who have created, Bitcoin mining is, you can earn a little bit of money on it, but you have to have huge computing power, huge.
Right.
And just to give you an example, I remember when it was starting and I was sort of interested in it, and this is a decade or so ago when I was first communicating with Nozomi. People said, oh, I bought a special computer just to do Bitcoin mining, but I ran it and I ran the process of Bitcoin mining, and what you're doing is you're validating the code that is in a certain string of data, right? To validate that this is legitimate and that this is not legitimate, right? And if you successfully validate something, some part of Bitcoin, and you're the first one, you have to be the first one, then you earn certain Bitcoin, you earn Bitcoins. Okay, you literally earn Bitcoins. And the problem is you have to be first, and they get more and more complex as they go on. So each addition to Bitcoin since the beginning of time is in every transaction. And so in the last 10 years, Bitcoin is split and split and split and split. And, there are no more Bitcoins, but the the code is unchanged, but the pieces have gotten smaller that you're validating by and large, or they've gotten different in some way. And so your computer system has to be able to figure that out and confirm the Bitcoins. So yesterday morning before we started, Debbie says, well, what about the environment? I said, what? What about the environment? Because I hadn't been in touch with Nozomi in about 4 years for reasons beyond the scope of this discussion, having nothing to do with Nozomi, with whom I agree 99% of the time. Anyway, there's this article of this Bitcoin mining operation in upstate New York, and it's next to Seneca Lake. And because the mining operation creates so much heat to operate it, there's so many computers across the walls to operate the thing, it creates huge heat, and they bring in water from Seneca Lake and then discharge it back into the lake. And of course, when they're discharging it back into the lake, it is 98 degrees. And so it's changing the temperature of the lake.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And Seneca Lake is one of the Finger Lakes. So it's a large body of water, right?
Right.
And to be able to influence that size of body of water with heat is a non-trivial thing, right? And so I didn't know about that one. I hadn't heard that one. And
yeah, it's not just a couple of big computers in somebody's garage anymore. It's
no.
It's the whole telephone system in one little spot.
Yeah, the picture Deb showed me from the article was like a telephone exchange or something like that, right? And so anyway, so there's that issue, and anyway, Nozomi was quite defensive about Bitcoin, and we surmise that she doesn't normally get into audiences that are not crypto lovers. Okay, in other words, the cryptocurrency industry has created its own weather system, let's say, and annual meetings and regional meetings and all kinds of stuff, right? And so Nozomi goes to a lot of those meetings, and so all those meetings are people who are interested in or are doing some sort of cryptocurrency. And so she comes into a group that's purely Jungian, and into the spiritual side of Jungian psychology to a degree. And Nancy Paff asks the question, where is the spiritual in this? And which was a fair enough question, quite honestly, right? And it was all logos all the time. So where is the Eros side? And Nozomi was not equipped to answer that question, and she was flailing about. And I said, "Okay, well, let me ease your pain a little bit." Nancy, we don't look to our currency to deal with our spiritual selves. Currency is a thing. It's not it's not on the spiritual side at all. And so it's a tool. So anyway, Big Cat says Bitcoin is a tool. It has no magical individuation properties. I saw no connection between Jung and Bitcoin. Well, in Nozomi's mind, there is, and in terms of individuation, her individuation, it definitely has had an effect. But
it seems to me, and I appreciate that kind of give her throw a bone, give her a bye. And Nancy's question, I mean, is fair though, because I mean, you get the "in God we trust" and "e pluribus unum" and all these other symbols that we have on our currency that make it feel as if it's more than just a thing. And it is just a thing because we're actually, now that of course we're not on the gold standard since 1936 or so, or
well, no. Since 1972, Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard entirely.
Okay, because I think the last gold banknotes were, I think, in the 30s or the 40s, because then it was silver certificates, and then you're right, and then which Richard Nixon took us off of it. So, but now it's a perceived value. I mean, these are pieces of cotton with special super secret ink and all the little spiders stuck in the arabesques and the webbing in the back that are hidden for counterfeiting, but it is still just a thing that we associate value with. So I'm wondering, I wish I was there yesterday, but money in that sense, or currency is a better, I think, term to use, is such an associated value that I think it gets its own persona that's perceived as something deeper. And in reality, it's literally just a method of exchange. I mean, even with Bitcoin now, a colleague of mine is really on me to get some of my tarot images as nifties, the NFT, the non-fungible token. And it'd be so nifty to have a nifty. And it's still kind of not so much new to me as it is a little gimmicky. And the ability to make a bunch of money is attractive. At the same time, it's pretty expensive to step into. And so there's a whole, do I perceive any value in doing it? Which goes back to Nancy's question, is where's the spiritual? And I just often don't jump on the bandwagon, right? When
I always think of the appellation "godless money" and "godless money," and
godless money.
So there's a few good comments here, and there's an aside which I'd like to take first because it's one that is basic to Jungian psychology, and this is from Zen Mode Trading. Says, "Love this channel. I would love it if they discussed, I guess they is us, Jung's Gnostic ring, and Jung never went under labels like the Gnostics." So go ahead. I'll give you the honor of going first.
I think, I love that question. I love the comment of, would we discuss that? Jung's, I think it can kind of be encapsulated when Jung said, "I'm so glad I'm Carl Jung, so I don't have to be a Jungian." And that's where the Gnostic rings and etc. I mean, there were so many spinoffs that were in support of him, but they were literally limited chapters of the expanse that was Carl Jung. So I think.
Well, let me address this a little bit further. The reason Dr. Jung was interested in Gnosticism was that the Gnostics, apparently, and we don't know anything directly from the Gnostics because they were all burned at the stake by the Catholic Church, and so all we have is what the Catholics wrote about the Gnostics, and Well, plus I guess we have the Nag Hammadi library and a few other things that have been found since World War II that give us the Gospel of Thomas.
I was going to say, yeah, the Nag Hammadi and the Gospel of Thomas, exactly.
Yeah, which have Gnostic overtones, apparently. Now, I'm not an expert on Gnosticism. You'd have to go to Stephen Heller for that. But my take on it over the years is that Jung thought it important that the Gnostics believed in a direct experience of God, not intermediation of the clergy or any other such yo-yo. Because when you intermediate the experience, then you have excuses to grab money from people, and you can build cathedrals and you can build the Vatican, and there's a hell of a lot of dark money that did all that building.
Right? Well, and actually, ecclesiastical institutions, to their credit, I have to say, are the perfect business model. I mean, you have an invisible product, and when it doesn't work, you blame the congregation and tell them to get therapy.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I agree with the direct without intermediation experience of the divine, because that then goes to the small s and capital S self. And so there's the know thyself, which is over, Oracle.
Well, and it has to do with numinous experiences and when you've had a so-called religious experience,
right,
you've had it. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt. Okay.
Right.
And I've had I have them almost daily, but or I've had them constantly, but almost daily I have one that I'm conscious of, and a few of them I have caught on video, and
right,
and one I caught it with still photographs, and so those can't be doubted. Okay. I mean, you can doubt me and how I was feeling about those moments, because they won't be your moments, they're my moments. But holy smokes. And what I know now, after 75 years of working on it, is that everything I can remember, everything in my life that I can actually remember, was numinous to me. Everything. Okay. And so I would suggest, if you want to know what a numinous moment is, think back on your lifetime and what your memories are. And you've got some good examples, I would argue.
And a quote I use with numinous experiences is that forgetting is forgetting. It makes more room for the good stuff. And when you give your own thoughts and memories room to breathe, kind of the weeding of what you forget, those numinous experiences become more prominent. They're like flowers in a garden. You kind of look back and, like you say, what's an indelible memory that you have is the question you can ask yourself. And
sure.
And then right then, poof, there is one. And I mean, if you remember your birthday party when you were 3, but not when you were 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8, I mean, that's pretty prominent as a feature of a numinous experience.
Precisely. I mean, I even have one of those, because I remember my 5th birthday, or I'm sorry, it must have been my 6th birthday, when we were living in Kodiak, and my father, Buzz Corey, or whoever, the early space cadet on TV Africa, was a big thing. I had seen some of those. They were basically stage plays that were televised, right? And I had seen a few of them while we were in Philadelphia before we went up to Kodiak. And so I was very excited about those. And my father made space helmets for all the kids that were coming to my birthday party. And the way he did it, it was just priceless. He bought 10 colored bowls about like this, right? And he put holes in the side of it. And then he took clear plastic and made a visor out of the clear plastic and just put fasteners into the space helmet, right? Holding the visors on. And he painted the name of each child onto each of these space helmets. Oh, and it had wire, it had some sort of covered wire like this coming out of the side of it and coming down to a drain strainer. Okay. A drain strainer, which he had made into a microphone, which was the microphone, right? and I mean, I can still describe this absolutely clearly. And right at the moment of my birthday party, I was really disappointed because my father was ordered to fly to Seattle from Kodiak for some sort of meeting. I don't know what it was about, no idea, but I know he went away for 3 or 4 days and came back. And so my mother, ran the birthday party as she would have anyway, but I was really disappointed that my father wasn't there. And she had made a birthday cake that was shaped like a spaceship. And she had made it out of a cake mold that was in the shape of a lamb. It was a big cake mold and it had a head on it. Okay, the mold was two-sided. So you cooked the cake inside the mold, right? And then took the two halves apart and you had a lamb, which people use for Easter, right?
Right.
But my mother took this cake mold, cut off the head of the lamb.
They cut off the head, right?
Yeah. Cut off the head
sacrificial lamb cake,
right? Did a little carving of the cake so that it would be shaped like a spaceship, and then iced it beautifully so that it looked
nice.
And so actually the weird thing is there was disappointment in that party because I had built it up so much in my mind what it would be like to play with my friends with these space helmets that several of them didn't get it. I mean, it was about 10 kids, right? And everybody had a space helmet of their own that they could take home. And it was just a very special thing. And some of these little kids didn't really grok how cool it was. And so there was the disappointment of not having my father there, and also the disappointment that the kids of themselves, several of them didn't quite grok how special it was. And
well, I have to say that drain strainer for a microphone is priceless. That's such a finishing touch. I've seen people need a microphone as a prop for online videos where you're being recorded like this. You don't need a mic, but I remember I needed a prop, and all of a sudden I hear this boom, boom, boom in the kitchen. And I'm like, what's going on? We're about to record. Hold on. And you hear the water run, and then boom, boom, boom. And she comes out and she hands, the espresso handle. she hands it up. She goes, turn it around with little dots this way. And it looked like a 1950s radio microphone. So when you said the drain strainer, it just brought that flooding back too. That's priceless.
Right. And so anyway, that birthday that I had in 1953, it was my seventh, oh gosh, was 53. So yeah, it had to be my 7th birthday, I guess. Because I remember where I was living and what year that had to be and so on. So it was anyway 1953, and so I had this birthday party, and it kind of bombed, but the anticipation of it was so outstanding, and that I can still describe it in huge detail
Right,
now,
right.
including how the cake was made.
Well, and I think what's really interesting to me about that is you have a numinous experience that's a combination of this celebratory joy and also the disappointment, but both together. I mean, that's quite a figure ground going. Now, the fact that you remember both almost as prominently and that's really stunning.
Well, the fact that I had both joy and disappointment. I mean,
right.
When do I remember an actual emotion that I physically had?
Right.
And also 2 emotions on the same day.
On the same day, right? That's really impressive. That's really impressive.
Yeah, and so that's a numinous experience. Okay, so I've just described it to everybody. You could hang up from Jung and go on with your lives, because now you know. Now you know what a religious experience is all about.
You heard it here today, on this day, July 25th, 2021.
Right. And so going back to the question, that's what Gnosticism was really about. It was about having a direct experience of God. And for me at that age, I couldn't put my finger on it or describe it at that time, but looking back on it, definitely. I mean, I lived in Kodiak for 16 months, I guess. And, that's one of the days I remember from that assignment my father had. I mean, I remember the day that we arrived in Kodiak, because my mother had driven the 3 children across the country through the Badlands when she was 25 years old without my father, which was quite an amazing thing. But then we had to sit in Seattle for 2 months waiting for shipping to Kodiak, and because it was after the war and the Navy didn't have a lot of assets, and so we had to wait for a ship to take us up there, and which did my first voyage, much of which I spent sick, and I remember that too. And when the ship left Seattle, there was an Army band on the dock, and people were throwing streamers off the ship and all that stuff, and my mother says, well, that's just an Army band. Wait until we get to Kodiak and there'll be Navy band there, right? And my mother started to tell this story about how wonderful the Navy band would be in Kodiak, right? So the ship comes into the dock in Kodiak, was probably being pushed by a tug or something, but it comes very slowly up against the dock, and it's pouring rain because Kodiak has 140 inches of rain every year. Okay, so it's pouring rain, and there's nobody on the dock, not a soul. And after about 10 minutes of the ship just simply sitting there next to the dock, one single sailor comes out and he grabs a hawser that had been lowered down from the ship with a marlin spike. He pulls it in, puts it over the cleat, and walks back. That was the end of it. That was the welcome.
Well, that's like the sequel to your birthday party. It's like,
well, that was a prequel to my birthday party, but yes.
yeah, well, yeah, you get the build up and then the disappointment. It's like, because you're coming from the Navy band and it's just raining.
And I was expecting the Navy band too, because my mother's buildup of that. And and I had been very sick on that voyage, going across from Seattle to Kodiak, which was 3 days. And anyway, so I remember that. I remember a few other things in Kodiak. But that birthday party was definitely numinous and special. And as you see, because I've had a life where I've lived in a lot of places, all I have to do is remember something that happened to me, and I can remember the environment, and therefore I know what year it happened.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because I know what years we were in these places. So interesting.
Well, and also there's a book, I was looking it up. I think it's called Jung and the Gospel of St. Thomas. But it's not by Jung at all. So it's attributions, but it also goes further into, I think, that, for example, the disappearance of the Essenic Jews who went off into secret, which in a sense, if I remember correctly, alongside the Nag Hammadi, that was taking the direct experience even further. And if I remember that correctly, but Gnosticism is intensely interesting in terms of conceptually. When I get into all of the structural aspects, I don't get lost. I get a little disinterested, because then it becomes a little too institutional, and gets away from the direct intermediate. And that happens, I think, with everything. It gets established, and all of a sudden the logos comes in to tell us what this really is.
Right.
And that's almost too specific.
Right. And so in terms of Jung's ring, yes, he did wear a Gnostic ring. And to me, that just represents the fact that he believed that you had to have a direct experience to grok anything. Okay. People can tell you, people can tell you about Bitcoin until they're blue in the face, and that's all logos. Just as Omi did yesterday, but until you've actually had an experience with it and know what it can do for you, man, you haven't gotten it yet. And
I had a friend in direct experience who misread some charts, and I mean misread their astrology charts, and then dialed in and got pretty deep in, and was trying to reach out and get me to join. And hey, it's proposed to do this and this, and it's supposed to. And I said, I feel the sensationalism in your voice. You're really you're biting the carrot that's hanging in front of your face, but it's still attached to the string and the stick that's attached to your back. You're following a false. You're really excited. That's a bad time to invest. And then it wasn't 2 months later. You didn't take my advice, did you? He came back with, and I said, well, certainly not. I was trying to slow you down. He said, I'm way overextended into Bitcoin, and now I have to ride it out. I'm like, well, just like every other investment, don't invest for the short term. Quick fixes have shallow roots, but he took a numinous, disappointing experience, and it was almost life-changing. I mean, to the point, and it's like, wow, it becomes almost a cult if you go into that far.
Oh, sure, it does. And there's a distinction between the Bitcoin market which is just a market like
Right.
any other market with ups and downs, and Bitcoin itself used for payment of whatever you're paying for. And so you have to make this clear distinction in your mind between the Bitcoin as a currency and the Bitcoin market, which is a completely different thing. It's manipulated in completely traditional market methods that people who control it. So yes, you know, the thing about Bitcoin, which was a very interesting secret that Nozomi told yesterday, was that Bitcoin itself is designed to go up in value. Okay, Bitcoin itself is designed to go up in value. But the problem is that's not what happens in these markets. Okay, and you know, the market, you know, and so any cryptocurrency, let's think through it a moment. Cryptocurrency, if you own the Bitcoin itself and don't trade in Bitcoin, it will increase in value over time, maybe a lot.
I appreciate, yeah.
Maybe a lot. But if you buy, you know, somebody gives you shares in some Bitcoin thingy, you know, you might as well buy stock in Acme General.
Yeah, from the cartoon.
Yeah, right.
Well, you know, and you make a good point there, because it in terms of the market, you get things like Ethereum and all the other types. And so basically what you have is a new international currency of multiple different countries, denominations. They just happen to all be the little green bits in electronic. And I will say personally, in terms of the non-fungible tokens, the Nifties, I transferred $300 or something over just so I could mint one. And I got, you know, business that was real. That was kind of an experiment, somewhat art projecty or e-art. But I had other commitments that were more important, and I left it and I didn't mint it. And 6 weeks later, I come back and I'm going through my calendar and like, okay, what are the little things I missed and I need to pick up, and what can I just dispense with? And I looked down and I hadn't checked off making it. Mm-hmm. So I go back, and the $300 is now worth $900 in those. And I kind of went, I'm not going to mint this. I'm going to just leave that and see what happens. And 6 weeks after that, it's worth $275. Mm-hmm. And so I start doing my graph, and I swear, sine cosine graph. And if I ran the average, zero delta, no change. Right. Over, you know, it. So there was the mood. If, you know, someone's going to get in riding high, and then they're going to drop low. And that to me could be very, very psychological in terms of what it will induce in people, just like the market. And it completely
sucks in these young techies without fail, because they come in, they read the paper by Satoshi Nakamoto, which is a fictitious name. By the way, I established the meaning of it last night. I had an idea of what the meaning of it was, but my wife and I are both basically kanji scholars, and so we know what Japanese kanji means. And so, you know, I was chatting with Deb last night about what the name means, the fictitious name. And she says, well, you won't know until you actually see the kanji. And I said, oh yeah, okay, that's right. So I went on Google to find out what the kanji was for that pseudonym, and there is no kanji for that pseudonym. It's
Which
only
means it's
in,
fiction. Yeah.
pardon, it's in phonetic. It's in phonetic Japanese, which is called katakana, and there's two phonetic alphabets in Japanese. One of them is used exclusively for foreign words, and that's what this is in, or non-real words, let's say. And then there's hiragana, which is used to establish tense and various things like that, tense and gender and things like that in Japanese. And so the katakana, of course, is Satoshi Nakamoto. So then I looked up Japanese boys' names, and Satoshi means intelligent history. Okay, that's what its meaning is. If you get, a book of possible names that you might name your Japanese child, Satoshi is in there, and it means intelligent history. And Naka means inside, and moto, in this case, moto can mean a bunch of things, but I knew from my high school days, because I went to school in Motomachi, and Motomachi literally means original village. Okay, machi means village in Japanese, and moto means, the original village. And in that case, it's a place that exists in Yokohama called Motomachi, and it's the original village of Yokohama, right? But that's where it so happens my high school was. And so I knew it meant original. And so I render Nakamoto as original insider, right?
Like trading.
Yeah. So the inventor,
illegal trading.
Right. Well, no, but yeah. So the original, the fictitious name means intelligent history of the original insider of Bitcoin. Right. Mm-hmm. That's what. Well,
I like the intelligent history piece, because then that dials it into, this is still monetary currency, the concept.
So you've heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Skip Conover has worked out the meaning of Satoshi Nakamoto. Okay, now.
Ciphered just last night.
Pardon?
Ciphered just last night.
Yep, ciphered just last night. And so the thing is that, okay, so all these techies around the world said, oh, I see what this guy did. And in fact, Satoshi Nakamoto wrote a long paper on exactly how Bitcoin was created. So he made it available to the public, and anybody can just get that paper and read it and create a cryptocurrency with it. Okay. So there's no secret about it. And sure enough, that's what happened. A whole bunch of people said, oh, well, I'm a techie and I get all this stuff that he said. I know how to create an algorithm. So, I'll just create my own cryptocurrency. Well, there's an issue. It's a bit like network marketing. First in is best dressed. Okay. In network marketing, if you're not one of the founders of the company, you're going to be struggling to ever make any money at it. And so people get all excited about it when something new is created and it's selling through network marketing. But the later in you are, the harder it is to make money on it. And so the issue of Bitcoin is that it got a reputation early on, so it has the strongest reputation. So it's like the U.S. government. People believe in the strength of the U.S. government, right? But if you create, as you did, you created your own money basically by, selling something that really had no worth, but somebody decided it had worth and started to pass it along, right? So you can create your own money that way. If Tim Holmes does it in the form of paintings or sculptures, right? He creates sculptures and they produce money for him, right? And so, that's all well and good as long as the market holds. But, if there's 10,000 techies creating their own money and they all call it different things, then not all of them are going to regarded as equal in the marketplace. Okay, and so that's why Bitcoin is considered the most solid, because it's been there the longest, and it has a reputation both as a object of a market, but also as Bitcoin itself, which is designed to increase in value steadily. Okay.
And I appreciate you making that large of a fleshed out distinction, because what I find to keep my own sanity principle, for example, in my work, is to keep the concept of my professional service in place, not just what I do. And that way, what I do, the actions are somewhat logos, but then the heart of the matter is driven by the service I provide. And that to me is where the value lives. And I've noticed years, cycles of ups and downs. I've noticed that either when I've been changing, or in a sense, I don't understand my work as much, I'm going through some kind of flux, my business goes down. And I think there's a direct correlation to how engaged I'm actually able to be in what I'm doing. Whereas when I'm learning too much, it stacks the odds in a sense, I'm distracted. Now I need to learn. It's like gardening. You have to put new soil, amend the soil to keep it healthy.
Right.
But there's a give and take. I find that if you don't keep the conceptual piece there where the value lives, that's, I think, when you get lost, especially with these currency things, because you get dragged by the nose down the street behind the horse, and that's never a good experience.
Yeah. And, so it's just the way macroeconomics works, even in the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar, the reason it's strong is it's, after it went off the gold standard, the reason it's strong is because the United States is strong. And, if we look at Confederate money, there were coupons in the Virginia Pilot newspaper when I was a boy of 10, which said, "Save your Confederate money, the South will rise again." Well, we sort of have seen the apotheosis of that on January 6th, and you see where it led. And so, would you use money that those guys issued? Those people who were,
Well, and that's a great point, Skip, because even I don't know if it's the origin of the statement of not worth the paper it's printed on.
right.
The Confederate money was often printed on newsprint, which is the most unarchival, will deteriorate faster than, it's an acidic paper. Your money is literally going to erode before you're actually able to use it half the time.
Right.
And whereas the U.S. currency was made on cotton, so it's actually thin fabric. and it's pretty strong. I mean, you can tear it, but it's strong, and so
Yeah,
not
and
worth the money it's printed on. And
yeah,
speaks
and
to that value.
it's replaced constantly,
Right.
Banks make it as a an article of faith that they turn money. They turn in bills that are defective,
Right.
because they've been in circulation too long.
Right.
Not because they're counterfeit, but because they've been in circulation too long.
Right.
That's why you can get new dollar bills still.
Right.
But basically, the American dollar is not different from Bitcoin, honestly.
Right.
Okay, it's backed by the full faith and credit of the United States. But what's that worth? It just depends.
Well, yeah, and also the prevalency of it in terms of literally the macro and macroeconomics, that the U.S. dollar is so distributed around the globe that it's kind of the popularity contest of currency, where what's the majority of the amount of bills of any given denomination and country's issue that's present anywhere. And the U.S. dollar usually reigns as top dog or near the top, depending on where you are in the world.
Right.
And that then establishes further credence to believe in the value that they're quote unquote backing.
Right. But now the US dollar for international trading is actually just little electrons, little green electrons. And so it's not even represented by paper money.
Right.
And so the issue for the Federal Reserve in terms of managing inflation is that we have a growing population and we have growing industries, and the more people we have and the more industries we have means the more money supply we need just to stay even. And if the Fed doesn't keep pumping money into the new dollars into the system, then we start having deflation.
Right.
And then because the economy basically starts to die when that happens.
Right. And there's the erosion. So the conceptual erosion. I mean,
right. So the tightrope that the Fed walks is that it has to make just enough money so that there's a little bit of inflation, 1 or 2%, which has been the case for a decade or so now, but not too much. Right.
Well, and that goes hand in hand with the national debt as well. There's a certain portion at a certain place, not in the last 25 years, it's gone past that, but where the national debt was actually incentivizing borrowing and spending in such a way that it's different than your or my checkbook.
Oh, I mean, definitely.
We balance our checkbook to make sure we have money. The national debt was a leveraged debt piece. So there's more of the equity and also then credit that goes into it.
Right. And so the Chinese, for example, the Chinese own trillions of dollars in U.S. Treasury notes, and which is literally a loan. Okay, it's literally a loan, and the Chinese have purchased all those loans because they wanted to support their own economy.
Right.
And people aren't going to invest in the Chinese yuan, right?
Right.
You know, if you happen to be in Hong Kong and you want to invest in a currency, you'd much prefer to invest in a dollar than in Chinese yuan, because those are manipulated by the government. And so you can't predict what the result will be.
And
Yeah.
even more than ours is, in such a way that their currency is more of a paper electronic currency. I mean, the way the market is manipulated with the value towards the dollar, or the value of that currency towards other currencies.
Right. And what the Chinese have done is, the reason that we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't is they've convinced Americans through Walmart that it's better to have cheap goods, okay, made in China, than to keep our industries cooking. And so the result of that is that the Marine Corps can't go to war without boots that are imported, for example.
Right.
Okay? Nobody's making combat boots in the U.S. anymore. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention Nike and all those other people, right? And so the reason.
Well, and that creates quite a supply line issue if the military doesn't have boots, and that would be a guerrilla tactic. I mean,
right.
to just stop making them.
Right. So one of my midshipmen who became an F-18 pilot had been out on a deployment. When he came back, he said, Skip, the Chinese can put up 3,000 jet fighters against us. And, if we have 5 carriers in the Formosa, in the region of Taiwan, we can only put up 500 from 5 aircraft carriers, and we only have 12 aircraft carriers, right? And so they are in constant flow in various ways. And so the most aircraft carriers we probably can deploy someplace specific is like 5 at a time. And he said, so, they would have 3,000 fighters against us and we would only have 500. And I said, well, Craig, don't worry about that, because if the Chinese ever started a war against us, their entire economy would collapse. Because who's going to pay a debt? Who's going to pay the $5 trillion in debt to a country you're at war with? Right. That's for openers. And then who's going to buy combat boots from China if you're at war with China? That just ain't going to work. So we have this symbiosis that most people just don't understand. And so, for example, the trade deficit, there's no trade deficit. Okay, the little green electrons, and we're happy with the hard goods. And so the trade deficit is just a number that represents the difference between how much we spend overseas versus how much we spend in the United States. Right. And so it's a statistical number having zero meaning, except politicians sell it like it's on your credit card or something, and therefore most people misunderstand what it means. There's no trade deficit.
Yeah, there's just a rhythm and an intensity to which is the money going to or from, and then it goes from back to. I mean,
Right.
it's ebb and flow of the ocean is really about the
Right.
meaning you can put to it.
So it's actually a pretty good deal for the United States, because we send them little green electrons and they actually send us hard goods that can be sold cheaply at Walmart. Right. So anyway, I guess we've been ignoring our online chat. So let me go back.
See what the comments are. Because we've basically been talking about trading money for things we perceive value in.
Right. And so it's all psychological. It's how the government makes the sausage, but
that's a really good analogy. So
right. So let me just see here. Okay, so Big Cat saw no connection between Jung and Bitcoin. Well, we've been talking about that for the last hour and a half, so I guess we can go on from that. Love this channel. Would love if we discussed about the Gnostics. Okay, so Jung was not a churchman. He didn't believe in institutional religion per se. Mm-hmm. And if you're a Jungian, you can accept all religions because they're all true and they're all false in various degrees. and so let's look at what is really true about your life, and which you can touch, and that's the only thing that matters. Okay. And the church or the synagogue, they create moral people. They help us create communities that don't murder one another, at least. And so, in that respect, they provide good to the world. But the God up there, nah, no, that ain't so. Okay. And the devil down there, no, that ain't so either, as science logos has demonstrated. But they are in here. They are in your heart, and they are in us. And so if we can understand those things, which is experiential, and you're not going to grok it until you have the experience, then you grok it. And if you don't understand the word grok, Grok, please look it up on Wikipedia. And Robert Heinlein wrote an entire novel that amounts to a definition of the word grok, which is called Stranger in a Strange Land. And it's about a human being who returns from a colony on Mars, and he can't connect with the human world. But
actually, a point just came up in my mind about difference between Jung and institutionalized religion or ecclesiastical structures. Jung had no catechism, and catechism would be the church making the logos out of the divine,
right,
and in a way of the rituals and the practices, whereas Jung wanted, again, that personal direct experience, no intermediary, which means no catechism. And his catechism was breath, living and action and research. I mean, he consummate researcher. And I think that's one
underlining books.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. And underlining lots of books.
Right. And he was asked, what was his spiritual practice? And his answer was underlining books.
And
I've been doing that all my life, and it took me, 50 years at least to figure out what the hell he was talking about. But the answer is, and all of you have seen the books that I've read because they're all underlined and marked. The reason is that it amounts to a meditation. Okay, if you go through the book and underline, meaning highlight in some way, so you can use a highlighter too, the elements of the page that are important to you, then even if it only causes you to stop for a second in your reading, it makes you integrate that particular phrase into your being. It causes integration. And whereas if you read a book like a novel, then okay, fine, you're seeing this wonderful story in your mind's eye, but have you really understood how the words go together and what they mean? And the things that I remember from novels, there are a few things, but for example, John le Carré's The Honorable Schoolboy, in many ways was sort of the history of my early life. And so I really love that book because it was really telling me, yeah, you're doing the right thing, right? And there's one quote in that novel, The Honorable Schoolboy, that's really important that I have used several times this week, which is act first and apologize later. Because if you don't, pretty soon you'll have to get London's permission to change your nappies.
Yeah, they'll ask for forgiveness instead of permission. Exactly.
Right. And
well, you're underlining books. I couldn't agree more, because to me it's in terms of it being meditation, because there's a discipline of the ritual of both resonance and descent. Just things that catch your eye, cause you to think, move you in such a way, like you said, to pause.
Right. Okay. So Ujjwal Mishra says Jung and privatization does not really correlate. Anything from Bitcoin to Dogecoin isn't related to our true self, and crypto is more of a machine like unconscious that would dictate our lives. And yeah, absolutely. And money does dictate our lives, whether it's in dollars or any other currency. And that's materialism, and that's my yacht with the name Never Enough, right? That's what it's about. And you can follow materialism all you want, whether you pay for it in dollars or Bitcoin or any other type of cryptocurrency, and it's not going to give you a happy life. You have to make the right decisions to make a happy life for yourself. And it's not going to be a priest or a rabbi or a minister that's going to give you a happy life. It's you that has to make yourself a happy life. And that's what, that's the mantra of Jordan Peterson, which is, once you reach maturity, you have to pick up a load. You have to take responsibility. The idea of becoming a mature human being is, okay, now you're a mature human being and you have to live life in this chaos that we live in. Right. And so, how are you going to do that? And that's the big issue.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There's also,
and so the currency that Jordan created, in terms of his image, that's a currency. Sure, it is a currency, but It only has a value based, in the end, it only has a value based on what you know about Jordan.
Well,
Right.
yeah, right. And like you said, the first one who's there is the best dressed and the one who's going to make the money, and because everything feeds up that way
Yeah.
rather than trickling down. And what's interesting even about that is it hasn't sold. I don't have any direct anecdotal experience, but what's interesting is that forever I will always get a certain percentage of every time it sells again. And so in a sense, the art never leaves the gallery or leaves the gallery's bank account, as it were, which to me is, I have a little bit of a conflict of that. It's like, no, you got to let things go. They graduate. You
Yep.
exchanged, but then there's always going to be this postcard pen pal of money that incrementally less and less and less shows up, but over time continually does. So
Yeah.
in a sense, that is network marketing and the pyramid in a way, the pyramid scheme.
Yeah. So Big Cat says there theoretically could be an infinite number of cryptos, absolutely, and it's all about branding. Someone could create a Jung coin to assist us in our individuations. Well, I acknowledge that they can create a Jung coin and it might assist you in your individuation. But, frankly, getting out of bed and putting your clothes on when you're a mature human being also helps you with your individuation every day, every step, every day, whatever you do, that is assisting you in your individuation. And it does not stop until the engine, which is your body, stops entirely. Okay.
Well, and to make an interesting, I think, observation here, for example, as a former philatelist, stamp collector, if I take the two first actual stamps, not pre postal service, but the two, I think Washington and Jefferson, I think 1847, and they have value to a stamp collector depending on their condition. And then I take someone bought Twitter's first tweet, and I'm it's banked on their computer somewhere, or they have but it's interesting to me that I can open my stamp book and go, oh, look, those are from 1847. But then I look at Twitter's first tweet and I'm kind of thinking, well, yeah, I have a date, but it's somehow still not real. But also, I grew up with paper, not with an iPad in my hand. So I think the part of that, I have to own that I'm in that bridge generation that kind of gets it, understands it, but also kind of doesn't get it.
Yeah.
And I have to own that because it's a whole different ball of wax.
Right. Okay.
Or e-wax.
All right. I'm going to skip some of these things just because we can't get to everything. And Art says, I hope you're doing well. And as you see, I'm still here and I've been through 28 radiation treatments so far.
So you only have 15 to go?
15 to go.
Yeah.
That's 3 weeks, 5 days a week. And, the treatment itself is no big deal, but and I actually sleep through it most days, but the prep for it gets more and more challenging. And I'll just give people a sense of it. You have to appear at your treatment with an empty bowel and a comfortably full bladder. Okay. And the reason they run the place like the Marine Corps is if they get late, you show up and you have a comfortably full bladder at your appointment time of 11 o'clock. And this happened to me this week. And they take you at 11:30. Well, then it's not pretty. Okay. and so it is a challenging process. And
Is the comfortably full bladder kind of like the Bitcoin lake? I mean, is it kind of a coolant that distributes the radiation heat, or
no. It's about moving your bladder and your rectum out of the way so that only your prostate is hit by the radiation.
Okay.
So it's targeting the prostate and not your bladder and not your rectum. And this is how it's accomplished. Okay. And so, if you come with your rectum full of gas, for example, that's a full rectum, whether it's full of material or not. If it has gas in it, it's pushing different things around in
that makes sense.
way. So you have to create an appropriate target for the radiation, and your life depends on it. And your life depends on it, because if they irradiate your bladder or your rectum, then, oh, by the way, you might die from having something go wrong with your bladder or your rectum, right? So it's not pretty. But I only have 15 more days of that, and then that'll be over.
Almost there.
Yeah, almost there. But there are other side effects which I'm not going to speak out loud. I'll tell people privately if they want to ask me in my physical presence. But you have to learn some things for yourself, right?
Right.
It's non-trivial. I can tell you that the prep for radiation treatment is non-trivial, and I'm actually looking forward to my hip replacement. I can't wait. Big Cat says Skip does not endorse any drug experiences on this channel. That's absolutely true. And look, for the drug issue, you can get an experience by taking drugs. I have no doubt about that. But we killed 92,000 Americans last year, in 1 year. And oh, by the way, in however many years of the Vietnam War, we killed only 58,000 by comparison over the whole Vietnam War. And, and as they've been pointing out, we've now killed with COVID more people than died in all of the wars of the American experience, all American wars. And so, we have to pay attention, folks. This stuff is non-trivial. If you're selling a drug experience, go take your individuation someplace else, please. Let's see. Big Cat says, if you want to discuss psychedelics, go someplace else. There are thousands of channels which do that. I'm sure there are. And, that isn't what we're about, and I don't recommend it. That's a whole industry that feeds on ignorant young people, basically. And by the way, we've lost 5 in the last 3 years in my extended family. Um, and so not any of my children, thankfully. You know, when my eldest daughter, who's now a licensed mental health professional, and in her mid 40s, was 12 years old, she came to me and said, "Dad, what do I do about drugs in school?" And um, I I didn't know what to say to her at that moment when she asked me that question. But what I did was, I wrote a short story for her only called Natalie's Choice. My daughter's name is Natasha, which means Christmas child. It's the same as Noel, and it also is the same as Natalie. So I wrote this story called Natalie's Choice. And in this story, Natalie gets pulled into doing something like that, and she's not meaning to hurt anybody or be hurt, but she's in an automobile accident and she loses her foot, and psychologically, losing your foot means losing your platform in life, and archetypally, it's extremely important to you. And so after I wrote that story and passed it around among my daughters, not a single one of them ever had a problem that I'm aware of. And I stayed quite close to them over their growing up years, even though I divorced their mother. And so, you know, it's a choice, and you make that choice, and you risk your life, or you risk your platform in the world type thing. And,
right. Well, and I will say too, with psychedelics, not from personal experience, I don't feel I need them. I find that there's a quick fixes have shallow roots piece, because I know some people who do, but they're also shamans and they're consistently doing their own work. So, but that's a minority of, I think, the research, because a lot of people are going for like a tourist dose, so to speak, thinking that this is going to change their lives. And all it does is take away some choice, because then their brain will stop producing some things after a while, because it's thinking it's going to receive the substitute. And I think then that over time can actually create a diminishment of psychological faculty.
Right. And Zen mode trading is talking about, and he says in terms of cryptocurrency, I think, and he is right, Skip, that is, advising China is making an alternative banking infrastructure. And Indonesia, for example, and the people in Turkey are in the dire need of a solution. Absolutely. Okay. Because the people of Turkey, you know, the majority want to be European. They don't want to be ancient Muslims, and they're having religion crammed down their throats in Turkey right now. And Erdogan, the president of Turkey, who has actually denounced me by name in front of 1 million people in Ankara. Good, long story, but that's true story. Erdogan, has all this holier than thou BS that he pushes to keep himself in power. But meanwhile, he spent $250 million on a new palace for himself to live in. And many of the people of Turkey don't have anything like that. And, this is the point. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so, the Russians were sold the Communist Manifesto, which they bought in on in 1917, and they were all for it. And Joseph Stalin rode that wave into power. And once he was in power, he killed 20 million of his own people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he was just a ruthless dictator. And basically the same is true of Adolf Hitler. So any people that get into absolute power, they always become a monarchy, and a ruthless one at that.
And even with Stalin, then he got to the point of the craziness where he had all the doctors executed. So then when he got sick, no one could help him.
Yeah, I hate it when that happens.
Yeah, so it's self-created, self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. And Zen Mode says, yeah, China is the warehouse of the world. I would call it the also the industry of the world, the manufacturing industry of the world by and large. And let's see. America provides services and China provides goods, right? America's power is financial power. China makes everything now. Eventually, China will just stop accepting U.S. electrons. Well, actually, they won't, because if they stop accepting U.S. electrons to the tune of about $500 million worth every month, or more, maybe $1 billion worth every month, their industry simply stops. So, and they know that. And so they know that they can't do that.
Basically, it's hard to jump out of a moving car.
Yeah.
You have to.
And Big Cat said he spent his whole vacation going through his father-in-law's 11,000 stamps. Well, we have a similar issue in my family. And, we have a stamp album that is incredibly valuable, that was started by my wife's at least grandfather, and in the 19-teens, and we simply don't know what's in there and how much it's worth. I know it's worth thousands, if not millions now. If you had the stamp that mistakenly printed the biplane upside down,
the inverted Jenny. Yeah,
the inverted Jenny, you'd have something very valuable. But
that brings up a really good point, Skip, because with stamp collecting, I actually went 10 years ago to have my collection appraised, knowing that I started when I was 3, and any job I had as a teenager, I always spent probably 50% of my income. Every Saturday I was hanging out, not at the pool, I was at the stamp store, and it taught me history and all these kind of things. But I had several key pieces that were certainly still valuable. But the stamp collecting or stamp collectors market is now quite a hybrid. There were lots of things I had that, say, 25, 30 years ago would have been worth thousands of dollars. And the appraiser came in and said, this whole set here, you might just want to use it for postage. Their face value. And I looked at him and I said, that's a really great way to make these more rare. How many people have you got to destroy theirs? Are you keeping yours? And he said, well, of course. Like, thank you, I'll be leaving,
Yeah.
but
Well,
but
and the
there
other,
was, go
yeah,
ahead.
the other problem with that is you better not give your stamp collection to an appraiser, or you're not going to know what it's really worth. And
Right.
if it's going to be appraised, you need to be sitting right in front of the appraiser and watch his hands very carefully,
Right.
because if he sees the inverted Jenny in your book, it could just disappear while you go to the head,
Or even worse, the tweezers go in the show guard mount, pull it out, and the facsimile thereof goes in, and you don't notice until it's too late.
Yeah, something like that. So if you have a stamp collection, and many families do, because it was very popular in the first half of the 20th century, especially. Those are, those can have some incredibly valuable items in them. And I have a stamp collection like that as well. Not anything like my father-in-law's collection or my grandfather-in-law's collection, but I have quite a number of stamps. But how do you'd have to put full time in to get it properly appraised, and know that you haven't been bilked by the appraiser.
Well, I remember having whole big Scott's inventory notebooks that had every stamp up to 1978, I think. And I had check marks and quantities and condition on every single stamp I had. And I laughed at it. It's more of a little accountant than I was a stamp collector.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you learn attention to detail like that.
Yeah, very definitely.
When you're 10 years old, and that, it's a good thing. So stamp collecting is a good thing.
Yeah.
But, if you ever think you're going to cash in on it, good God, what a nightmare.
It made for great show and tells in elementary school when I come in and I can quote 120 countries and tell you about the size of
yeah, I mean, that's how I learned about the world, literally. Was by collecting stamps.
Yeah, me as well.
And so let's see. Okay, Bayou 2 is saying, very appreciative. The book is too expensive. I'm not understanding what book you're referring to.
So you mean the red book?
I have no idea what he's referring to. What book?
I wonder if it was Jung and Gnosticism that I mentioned earlier, because that's really the only book.
Yeah.
Besides the Nag Hammadi, but I mean.
Okay, now that I've gotten now that I've opened the curiosity here of our troops, I better go get my essay on how I got into trouble with Erdogan,
with the play, right?
Yeah, because it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy for a story like that to get pushed out of proportion. So, and Skip's myth to go wild. But so I want to share. I'll share this article on the YouTube link. All right, so this is Skip's essay called I Am Guilty. I am a provocateur. And I'll give you the link too, Jordan, in case you don't have it handy. That's the link. But that tells basically the story of how, I basically got my tit in the
You hit return? It didn't. There it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on chat. And so, basically I got my tit in a ringer. And, so from that, I know, I mean, the metaphor I use is the sorcerer's apprentice. And the, in the movie Fantasia by Walt Disney, which was an animated film, there's this series of scenes with Mickey Mouse as the sorcerer's apprentice, and the sorcerer goes away for vacation, and the apprentice starts using his magic wand to get the brooms to carry water, and that works really well for a while, but ultimately he starts to get inundated, and it's only when the sorcerer comes back that he stops the flood, right? And so in the case of that play, we were kind of sorcerer's apprentices, but now we're master sorcerers, and the point is that a play that we did in Turkey, there's no way that any of the people involved in that play had any concept of what would happen as a result of that play, what would ultimately happen. But the fact is that the play got accused for causing the Gezi Park demonstrations in 2013, and 8 people were killed, many people were injured, lost their eyesight, et cetera, et cetera. And with 2020 hindsight, I can say, well, yeah, I see how that could happen. I never could have predicted it in advance, but and so I was the sorcerer's apprentice. But looking back on it, I have to say, well, now I'm a master sorcerer because I know what can happen, and I have to be very careful about what I say and do because I know what can happen. And that's why I say that. But anyway, there, you folks have the link.
Well, yeah, and that whole learning of discretion from visceral experience, I mean, indelible visceral experience is one of the chief responsibilities I find of any service provider, because you're wielding power, and if not wielded properly, you're wielding weapons, and that's there's danger. So I mean, it's understanding the depth.
Yeah, and
with which you operate.
we have over 14,000 subscribers to this YouTube channel, and we have a certain responsibility to be responsible in what we say,
right?
In what we say and do, and that's why I am extremely fastidious about the issue of using drugs as a means to have a religious experience. I just say, no, you cannot do that. If you do that, you're putting your life on the line, basically. And, there are other ways you can become intoxicated on life quite easily. But you have to understand that that's what you're trying to do. And,
right.
And, and so Big Cat says Erdogan is part of a worldwide uprising of right-wing authoritarians, Putin, Xi, Modi, Trump, and Bolsonaro, and Orban, Duda. Yeah, okay, fine. And Dr. Jung, Dr. Jung made the assertion that the only thing that gave him hope about the world was that, just a minute, I do need to use my cloaking. Sorry, folks. For privacy purposes. What was I saying?
You were talking about the right-wing uprising of the group of Erdogan.
Okay. So Dr. Jung made the point in volume 10 of the collected works, which is called Civilization in Transition. At the time of his death in 1961, he was quite pessimistic about the future of the human race because the Cold War was on. He didn't know about personal computing at all. If he knew about computers at all, it was about some UNIVAC that was off in some government lab or something like that. It wasn't about anything what computers can do today. And so he was saying that the only thing that gave him hope was the Western democracies. And why did they give him hope? And that was that because we are so diverse, no one group can gain the upper hand, particularly in the U.S. The U.S. is the blessed and unique country for that reason, because we got the golden ticket. We were located in a place on the planet that was hard to get to. And so very few human beings made it into North and South America before 13,000 years ago. And so, when the United States got settled, it was settled by people from all over the world. And so it's a messy place, but it's messy because of all the diversity, but at the same time we hammer out our differences, and over 400 years it's become stronger and stronger. So what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say just that whole network marketing, the first in kind of thing, the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, the land bridge across the Bering Strait that now is, ocean. But it's, the door opens, they cross, the door closes, and the few are there more
and they were left alone for 10,000 years or more.
Right, exactly.
They were left alone for more than 10,000 years.
They had the scoop on the continent.
Right. And so, it was definitely the land of milk and honey for the people we call Native Americans or Native South Americans. But, they were all human beings who suffer from the same foibles that we all suffer from. And so, the European immigration into the U.S., all those guys brought all their prejudices with them about all other nationalities, let's say. And
then to the point where then I have the fighting terrorism since 1492, Geronimo, Chapo, Chihuahua, and Perico, the four Native American warriors.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that.
Yeah. So
where there's a whole history in America that's told and then not told.
Right. But the strength of America is the fact that we have worked through all of or not all, but we've worked through a lot of our differences. And, I think you actually saw my reaction on January 6th, did you not?
Mm-hmm.
Jordan?
Yeah, we were all
there. We were all in an advanced reading group session, and my wife starts coming in and giving me the headlines. And, all of a sudden, everybody was freaking out, and there was a worry that the U.S. military would come to the support of the insurrectionists. And I simply said, no, they won't.
No.
And I never had any doubt about that, because I've been through 23 years of training in the Marine Corps, and I know how those guys think. And
yeah, don't blow any wind on the small fire; it will burn itself out.
Exactly.
If need be, just put a cup over it, but it's like
right. And so our former president has this vain hope that he can get people to rise up that way again. And I think the chances of that are zilch and nil.
Have you seen the Andy Borowitz, his meme on Trump's military coup?
Well, I've seen a lot of them, but tell us which one you're thinking of.
You see his back, and he's walking away, and it says, Trump's podiatrist gives him letters so he doesn't have to actually attend his own military coup.
Yeah. And, the difference between Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler is that Adolf Hitler actually did serve in the trenches, and actually earned his bones the old-fashioned way. Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm going to have to call this to a halt, because my
office, 5 after 2 hours.
My office has another call on it at this hour on Sundays. So let me just make one more quick look at the chats. Sorry, folks, I'm not going to comment any further on the points that you made on the YouTube chat. I'm sure that they have certain validity, but I don't think you need my oar in the pot to talk about that further. So I'm going to terminate for today. And so thank you very much, Jordan, for being here. And
definitely.
Have a fun day. Have a fun day on the
you too.
On the square.
By the way, I gotta go to work.
Yeah, by the way, one of my dizzy girlfriends from high school, believe it or not, who I still communicate with, these two women who knew me in high school every day. And one of them was passing through New Mexico, and I think is in New Mexico now. And I keep hoping that she's going to bump into you on the square or something. But you're on you're on the square in Taos. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'm on the John Dunn Plaza, which is off of the main square. It's John, John, Dunn, Dunn, Shops Plaza, and it's kind of a cobblestone pedestrian shop, a couple of small restaurants, but you kind of go into more of a slower feel. It's not as touristy, and I find it's better for tourists. It's
okay.
Different pace.
Dunne or Dunn?
Dunn. John Dunn Shops, SHOPS Plaza, which is off of the main plaza. It connects pretty much directly to it, and
it's SHOPPE or just
No,
P?
SHOPS, the Americanized spelling of shop. But so it's John Dunn Shops Plaza.
Plaza. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You never know.
Well, and I gotta go set up my umbrella, which is now dry from the rain.
Hey, where are you living? Are you still in the hotel or?
Yeah, I still have the first world problem of homeless in a hotel. So
Yeah.
But things are going. I think I'm going to go to the cabin next week, and the connection will be better too. So